Charles Darwin was actually not the first person to suggest that species could evolve. The fossil record already provided strong evidence that life had changed over time. Ideas differed, however, as to how change happened. The French naturalist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck proposed two of the first hypotheses. Lamarck suggested that the individual organisms could change during their lifetimes by selectively using or not using various parts of their bodies. He also suggested that individuals could pass these acquired traits on to their offspring, enabling species to change over time. Lamarck published these hypotheses in 1809, the year Darwin was born. Lamarck proposed that all organisms have an inborn urge to become more complex and more perfect. As a result, organisms change and acquire features that help them live more successfully in their environments. He thought that organisms could change the size or shape of their organs by using their bodies in new ways. According to Lamarck, for example, a water bird could have acquired long legs because it began to wade in deeper water looking for food. As the bird stretched its legs to stay above the water's surface, its legs would grow a little bit longer. Structures of individual organisms could also shrink if they were not used. If a bird stopped using its wings to fly, for example, its wings would become smaller. Lamarck called traits altered by an individual organism during its life acquired characteristics. Lamarck also suggested that if a bird acquired a trait like longer legs during its lifetime, it could pass that trait on to its offspring, a principle referred to as inheritance of acquired characteristics. Today we know that Lamarck's hypotheses are completely unsupported. Organisms do not have an inborn drive to become perfect. Evolution does not mean that a species becomes better over time. The word evolution just means change. Organisms don't necessarily become better over time, they change over time. Also, evolution does not progress in a predetermined direction. We also know that traits acquired by individuals during their lifetime, such as the loss of a limb, cannot be passed on to offspring. Still, Lamarck was one of the first naturalists to argue strongly that species are not fixed. He was among the first to propose a scientific description of natural processes he thought could enable species to change over time. Lamarck also recognized that organisms' adaptations are related to their environments and the way they make a living. So, although Lamarck's hypotheses explaining evolutionary change were wrong, his ideas paved the way for later biologists, including Darwin. Pay attention to the terminology here. We call Lamarck's ideas hypotheses, not theories, because they were not strongly supported by all the available evidence. They were based on some evidence, enough to form a hypothesis, but under careful inspection and scrutiny, there is not scientific evidence to support Lamarck's ideas. This is why Darwin's ideas about natural selection are considered a theory, and Lamarck's are only a hypothesis, or hypotheses, plural. A common misconception is that evolution produces perfect organisms. In the next lesson, this is addressed in detail, but think about what this means. The tendency toward perfection is one of the great flaws of Lamarck's ideas. No organism is perfectly adapted. In fact, the variations that make us less than perfect may also save us if our environment changes. If we were perfectly adapted to one specific environment, then geologic or other changes would leave us poorly adapted to that new environment. Again, hypotheses, unlike theories, are statements that are not necessarily supported by evidence, and Lamarck's ideas were not supported by evidence.